It's kind of mind-blowing when you actually stop and think about it, but PHP, well, it powers over 80% of the websites you use, like every single day.
Yeah, that's the statistic from Tapasoft, and it really puts things into perspective. We're talking huge platforms, Facebook even.
Exactly. So for you, the learner, this deep dive is really laser-focused on unlocking the essential stuff you need to understand PHP web development.
That's right. And we've pulled together a pretty insightful collection of expert resources for you. Think of this as your, well, express route to grasping what PHP is all about.
Mm-hmm.
We've got in-depth guides from Tapasoft and Browser Stack, some really practical advice from Geeks for Geeks and Cloudways on building those behind-the-scenes connections with APIs and databases.
Yeah.
Look at security must-knows from LabX, and then the comprehensive best practices outlined in PHP the right way.
Right. So our mission here is pretty simple. We want to distill the core concepts, the practical steps, the crucial things to be aware of, so you get a really clear understanding of PHP web development.
Yeah, clarity, not complexity.
Exactly. We're navigating everything from setting up your own, development playground to writing your first code, making friends with databases, locking down security, and, adopting the smartest approaches.
Okay, let's unpack this. In the world of web apps, what role does PHP actually play?
Okay, think of it this way. When you visit a website, some parts are static, right? Like the basic structure, HTML.
Sure.
But if a website changes based on what you do, maybe showing your latest notifications or personalized recommendations, that's where a dynamic language like PHP steps in.
Okay.
PHP code runs on the web server, and it can generate different content every single time someone visits a page. Both Tapasoft and Browser Stack really emphasize this fundamental role PHP plays in bringing websites to life.
That makes a lot of sense. So how does someone even begin to, experiment with this? What's the easiest way to start playing with PHP on your own computer? Well, the most straightforward way to get started locally is using what's called an all-in-one installer. Like XMPP is a really common one.
XMPP, okay.
Yeah. Think of it as a prepackaged toolkit for web development, right on your own machine. Tapasoft, Browser Stack, PHP, the right way, Cloudways, they all pretty much point to XMPP as a super convenient starting point.
Got it. So what's inside this XMPP toolkit? What goodies do you get?
Basically, XMPP sets up a complete local web server environment for you. Tapasoft explains it includes Apache,
which is the web server itself.
Right, the server that listens for requests from your browser. It also bundles MySQL, which is a really popular system for storing and organizing data, and PHPMyAdmin, which is a web-based tool that makes it easier to manage those MySQL databases.
Sounds like a one-stop shop. So what are the basic steps to get XMPP up and running then?
Tapasoft and Cloudways both walk through it. You basically download the XMPP installer from the Apache Friends website, you run it,
Okay.
and during setup, you just pick the components you need. For beginners, like Tapasoft recommends, just make sure you select Apache, MySQL, and PHPMyAdmin.
Right.
Once it's installed, you just open the XMPP control panel and click the start buttons next to Apache and MySQL. When they turn green, you're pretty much good to go.
And once those are running, how do I actually start writing and seeing PHP code do something? I can't just type PHP into my browser, can I?
Not quite. You'll need a place to write your PHP code. That's where a good code editor comes in handy.
Okay.
Tapasoft, Browser Stack, Cloudways, they all suggest using a dedicated code editor. Popular examples they mention are Sublime Text 3 and VS Code.
VS Code, yeah, heard of that one.
Right. These editors have features like highlighting your code, which makes it much easier to read and spot mistakes, And they often connect with other helpful development tools.
Okay, I've got XMPP running. I've picked a code editor. Now, how do I actually run some PHP? Let's say I want to see that classic hello world.
The process is pretty direct, actually. You open your code editor, type in the basic PHP for hello world, something like .php echo hello world.
Simple enough.
And then you save this file with the .php extension. Now, here's the key step, as both Tapasoft and Browser Stack point out. You need to save this file inside the htdocs folder.
htdocs, where do I find that?
It'll be inside your main XMPP installation directory. Think of the htdocs folder as like the public space for your local web server.
Okay, the htdocs folder. That's where the web server looks for the files it needs to show, right?
Exactly. So once your file, let's say you call it test.php, is in that htdocs folder, you just open your web browser, and in the address bar, you type localhost test.php.
Oh, okay.
Your browser sends a request to your local Apache server. Apache says, okay, I see this test.php file. It uses PHP to process the code inside, and the result Hello world, in this case, gets sent back to your browser and displayed. Boom.
Simple enough. Okay, so we can make PHP say hello. What about making it do a little more? Let's talk about some of the fundamental building blocks of the language. What are some core ideas we should wrap our heads around?
Variables. They're really foundational, as Tom Fassoft explains. Think of them like labeled containers that hold different kinds of info numbers, text, which programmers call strings.
Right, strings.
Even more complex things. In PHP, every variable name starts with a $sign. Dollar.
Yeah.
So if you want to store someone's age, you can write age equals 30.
Okay.
Tafasoft also gives a simple example using variables for basic math, like a 5 bother bottle 2, 2 0 equals 8, echo $1. That would just calculate and display the result of multiplying those three numbers.
So these containers let you do basic calculations. What about when you want to repeat an action multiple times? I remember hearing something about loops.
Yes, loops. Essential for automating repetitive tasks. Tafasoft mentions they let you run a block of code multiple times without writing it over and over.
Like little robot assistants in your code.
Kinda, yeah. For loops are great when you know exactly how many times you need to repeat something. While loops are more flexible, they keep going as long as a condition is true. And for each is perfect for working with collections of data, like lists.
Okay, so different tools for different repetition jobs.
Exactly. While the sources don't go super deep into how each one works, just knowing PHP has these tools for repetition is a key concept.
Okay, variables for data, loops for repetition. What about making decisions in code? That's where those if.else statements come in, right?
Precisely. BrowserStack is a clear example using if.else. These let your code take different paths depending on whether something's true or false.
Like a fork in the road for your program.
Exactly. Their example uses age key 50, if age 18, echo, you're allowed.
Okay.
So here, because age is 50, the condition age 18 is true, so the code in the if block runs, and it prints, you're allowed.
And if the age was, say, 16?
Then the condition would be false, and the code inside the else block not allowed would run instead.
That makes perfect sense. And organizing code into reusable chunks, that's functions, I believe.
You're spot on. Functions are like mini programs within your main program. Define it once, call it whenever you need it.
Efficient.
Very. BrowserStack shows this with a simple function to add two numbers. Function add num ints and num number 2, return numdum plus numdum 2 numbers, echo add num 3 2.
So addnum is the function. It takes two numbers, adds them, and gives back the result.
Exactly. The function addnum takes two integers, num dollar and num 2 2, and returns their sum. Then the echo addnum 3 2 line calls it with 3 and 2, and you'd see 5 displayed.
Got it.
BrowserStack also briefly mentions the basic arithmetic operators addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, which are, essential for doing calculations in PHP.
Of course. So we've got the language basics down, more or less.
Right.
Now, a huge part of web development is dealing with data, storing it, getting it back. PHP is known for its strong database connections, right?
Absolutely. BrowserStack really emphasizes PHP's excellent integration with databases like MySQL. This lets you easily store and retrieve the info that makes your web apps dynamic.
Okay.
Now, for PHP to actually talk to a MySQL database, it needs to establish a connection. PHP primarily offers two extensions for this, MySQL and PDO.
MySQL and PDO.
Yep. Cloudways and PHP, the right way, both highlight these as the main ways PHP interacts with databases. Think of them as different communication channels PHP can use.
Okay, two channels, MySQL and PDO, sound a bit technical. What's the key difference, simply put?
Well, MySQL is an improved extension specifically designed to work really well with, you guessed it, MySQL databases.
Makes sense.
PDO, which stands for PHP Data Objects, is a bit more general purpose. Cloudways explains that PDO gives you a consistent way for your PHP code to talk to various types of database systems, not just MySQL.
Oh, interesting. So if I wanted to switch databases later...
Using PDO might mean fewer code changes down the line, yeah. And importantly, both MySQL and PDO support crucial security features, like prepared statements. We should definitely talk more about those.
Okay, yeah, let's bookmark prepared statements.
I got
But
you.
first, say I've chosen my channel. Let's stick with MySQL for now, since we're talking MySQL. How do I actually create a database to store my website's info?
Cloudways points out you'll typically use phpMyAdmin for this. Remember that tool bundled with XAMPP?
Right, the web-based one.
Exactly. You access it through your browser, usually a localhost phpMyAdmin when XAMPP is running. Once you're in, you typically click New in the sidebar. Give your database a name, maybe Practice, like Cloudways suggests.
Okay.
Choose a character encoding, like UDFT General Oshi, to handle different characters properly, and then just click Create.
So the database exists. Now, how does my PHP code actually connect and talk to this practice database?
You'll need to create a specific PHP file just for handling the connection.
Mm.
Cloudways and Geeks for Geeks both provide examples. You might call it something like dbconnection.php.
Okay, a dedicated connection file.
Yeah, you keep it in your project folder. This file holds the PHP code that actually establishes the link to your MySQL server.
What kind of code would be in that dbconnection.php file if I'm using MySQL locally?
Cloudways gives a good example for a local setup. It involves defining variables for the key info, the database host.
Which is usually localhost.
Right, localhost when you're working on your own computer. Then the username, often root by default in XMPP, the password, which is typically empty by default in XMPP, and the name of the database you just created, practice.
Got it.
Then you create a new MySQL object using these details. And importantly, you should include error handling to check if the connection actually worked and show an error if it failed.
Good point, error handling.
Yeah. Cloudways even shows a similar example for connecting on their hosting platform, which would just use the specific details they provide. Geeks for Geeks also shows a connection script in their REST API guide.
And you mentioned PDO as the other way. How would that look in the connection file?
Cloudways provides a PDO alternative too. The core idea is similar: define host, username, password, database name.
But the syntax is different.
A bit, yeah. With PDO, you create a new PDO object, and you often build what's called a data source name, or DSN string. This includes the database type, MySQL, the host, the database name. You also have options to set attributes, like telling PDO to report database errors as exceptions, which is often a more robust way to handle problems.
You also briefly mentioned prepared statements earlier for both MySQL and PDO. Why are those so important? You said security.
Yes, absolutely crucial for security. Both Cloudways and PHP.
Yeah.
The right way explained, they help protect against a very common attack called SQL injection.
SQL injection, right. Heard of that. Sounds bad.
It is. Imagine ordering food. Instead of writing your whole specific order on the slip, which someone might tamper with, you use a standard form with blanks for burger type or toppings. The kitchen knows the structure and fills in your choices safely. Prepared statements are like that.
Okay, so it separates the command from the data.
Exactly. You define the structure of your database query with placeholders, and then you safely provide the actual data. This prevents nasty code from being snuck into your database queries through user input.
That makes a lot of sense. Security is definitely something you don't want to mess up. Before we dive deeper there, are there other tools or general practices that make PHP development smoother?
Oh, absolutely. BrowserStack highlights several PHP-based tools that can really boost productivity. Things like Cloud9 IDE, which is a development environment in your browser.
Cool.
.xdebug, a powerful tool for finding and fixing errors, what we call debugging.
Debugging, right?
PHP Unit and Behat, which are frameworks for writing automated tests to make sure your code works as expected.
Ah, testing frameworks. That sounds really important for making sure stuff doesn't break.
It really is. BrowserStack emphasizes having good testing strategies for reliable software. They also recommend consistent coding patterns, makes code easier to read and understand.
For others and yourself later.
Exactly. And avoiding unnecessary code duplication. Keep it DRY. Don't repeat yourself. Improves maintainability, sometimes even performance.
What about those IDEs, the more advanced code editors? Any standouts for PHP?
Yeah, BrowserStack lists several popular ones. Visual Studio Code, or VS Code, is super popular.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
It's lightweight but powerful. Huge range of extensions, great features like IntelliSense for code completion and debugging support, which Tafasoft also noted.
Okay.
Then there's PHP Swarm. It's specifically built for PHP. Really powerful, excellent debugging. Integrates well with things like Git for version control.
Right.
Atom is another option, open source, very customizable. And Eclipse is a more comprehensive IDE, often used for bigger, more complex projects.
Okay, so plenty of tools to explore there. Now let's switch back to security. You mentioned never trusting user input. How does that practically play out when writing PHP?
PHP, the right way, really hammers this home. Never trust any data that comes from outside your application. That's foreign input.
So not just forms.
Not just forms, Mesopost. It's also stuff in the server array server info. Request details, HTTP request bodies, uploaded files, data in sessions, cookies, even data you get from other websites or APIs.
Wow. Okay, so basically anything you didn't generate yourself.
Pretty much. The core idea, which LabX also highlights, is you must always sanitize and validate this input before you use it anywhere.
Sanitize and validate. What's the difference exactly?
Good question. Sanitization is about cleaning the input, removing or escaping potentially harmful characters. Like, If input might show up on a web page, you might remove HTML tags using strip tags,
Okay.
or convert special characters to HTML entities using HTML special cars like PHP the right way suggests. This helps prevent cross-site scripting or XSS attacks.
Right, XSS again, where someone injects bad script code.
Exactly. Validation, on the other hand, is about checking if the input meets the format and rules you expect. Is this email address actually a valid email format?
Yeah.
Is this age a number within a reasonable range?
I see. Cleaning versus checking.
So,
And PHP has built-in functions to help with this.
yes, definitely. PHP, the right way, specifically recommends using filter var and filter input. These functions have a whole bunch of predefined filters for common data types and validation rules. Makes it much easier.
Okay, filter var and filter input. Got it. What about something really sensitive like passwords? How should PHP handle those securely?
Password hashing, absolutely critical. PHP, the right way, explains hashing is a one-way process. It takes a password and creates a unique fixed-length string, the hash.
And you can't easily reverse it back to the original password.
Nope, that's the point. It's different from encryption, which is
Yes.
reversible. You should never store plain text passwords, ever.
Right.
PHP provides the password hash function.
Yep.
Tapasoft even touches on this in an example. It uses strong algorithms like bcrypt by default, and it's designed to adapt to newer, stronger algorithms in the future.
So how do you check if a login password is correct then?
When a user tries to log in, you take the password they entered, hash it using the same algorithm and settings, and then compare that newly generated hash to the hash you stored in the database using the password verify function.
Ah, password verify. Okay.
Yeah. And PHP, the right way, strongly advises against using older, weaker hashing methods. Stick with modern, robust ones like Argon2, Script, bcrypt, or PBKDF2.
Good advice. Are there any other common security traps PHP developers should watch out for?
Yes, definitely. PHP, the right way, warns strongly against using the unserialize function on data from untrusted sources.
Unserialize. Why is that bad?
Because attackers can sometimes craft malicious serialized data that, when unserialized, could let them execute arbitrary code on your server. It's a nasty vulnerability.
Yikes. Okay, avoid unserialize on untrusted data. What's safer?
Use a standard format like JSON with JSON encode and JSON encode. Much safer for data exchange.
Okay, anything else?
Securely storing configuration files is also really important. Store them outside the web root if you can, so they can't be accessed directly via browser.
And if they have to be in the web root?
Naming them with the .php extension can help. The server will try to execute them instead of just displaying the contents. Still, outside the root is better.
Gotcha.
And finally, configure error reporting differently for development versus production. Show all errors when you're building.
To help debug.
Right. But in production, on the live site, log errors to a file, but don't display them to users. Displaying errors can leak sensitive information about your setup.
That's a really comprehensive look at security. Definitely crucial stuff. Now, let's switch gears slightly. I noticed Geeks for Geeks had a section on building REST APIs with PHP and MySQL. What's the basic idea there?
Right. REST APIs, building one with PHP and MySQL lets you create a back-end system that other applications, maybe a front-end website, a mobile app, other services can talk to using standard web protocols, mainly HTTP.
So it's like an interface for data exchange.
Exactly. Geeks for Geeks outlines the basic steps. Creating PHP files to handle incoming requests, setting up that database connection we talked about. It's like building a set of digital doorways for different apps to request and exchange info.
And how do you actually test if your API doorways are working correctly?
Geeks for Geeks introduces Postman. It's a really valuable tool for testing APIs.
Postman.
It lets you send different kinds of HTTP requests, get, post, put, delete to your API's specific addresses or endpoints, and then you can see exactly what response your server sends back.
Can you give a quick rundown of what those different requests, BT, post, etc., are typically used for with an API?
Sure. A GET request is generally used to retrieve data. So sending GET to APIzers might fetch a list of all users, probably in JSON format.
Okay, GET is for getting data.
Right. A POST request is used to send new data to the server, usually to create something new. Geeks for Geeks shows sending POST with JSON data containing user details, name, email, age, to create a new user account.
So paste S is for creating. What about PUBI?
PUDI requests are generally used to update an existing resource. Their example shows sending PUDI to a specific user's endpoint, like a puters.id1, along with JSON data containing the updated info for that user.
Update existing stuff. Got it. And delete.
pretty self-explanatory. Used to remove a resource. You might send delete to apehooters.id1 to delete the user with ID1. Geeks for Geeks even has visuals using Postman to show these requests and expected responses.
That gives a solid foundational idea of REST APIs.
Okay.
So we've covered a lot of ground. From setting up your local PHP environment with XAMTP to writing basic code, connecting to MySQL databases with MySQL and PDO, thinking critically about security input sanitization, validation, password hashing.
Oh, crucial.
And even touching on building APIs.
Yeah.
Any final essential tools or practices for someone getting into PHP web dev?
Yes, one really important one, Composer. PHP, the right way, introduces it as the recommended dependency manager for PHP.
Dependency manager.
Yeah, imagine building a house. Instead of making every single nail and screw yourself.
You'd buy them pre-made.
Exactly. Composer is like that for PHP projects. It lets you easily pull in pre-built packages of code libraries for handling logins, processing images, whatever, saving you tons of time.
Where do these packages come from?
Packagist is the main public repository where these Composer-compatible PHP libraries live. Composer handles installing them, updating them, even automatically loading them into your project.
So it manages all the external code your project depends on.
Precisely. While Pure was an older system, Composer is the modern standard. Using Composer and Packagist is a really efficient way to leverage the huge ecosystem of existing PHP code.
Okay, let's quickly recap the key takeaways then. We've seen PHP as this incredibly common language powering a massive chunk of the internet.
Huge, yeah.
We've explored getting started with XMPP, writing basic PHP, connecting to MySQL, using MySQL or PDO.
And the difference there?
And why security measures like input sanitization, validation, and proper password hashing are absolutely non-negotiable.
Cannot stress that enough.
We also got a good look at essential tools like IDEs and Composer, plus a basic grasp of REST APIs. It really feels like you, the learner, now have a much clearer picture of why PHP is still so dominant and how you can start or continue learning.
Absolutely. And just to get you thinking further, consider that vast ecosystem of PHP libraries and frameworks available via Composer. How might exploring powerful tools like, say, Laravel or Symfony, or even more specialized libraries, speed up your development? How could they help you tackle much more complex projects?
Good question.
And also, thinking back to security, what specific vulnerabilities may be around user input, session management, might be most relevant to the kinds of web apps you're interested in building or understanding?
Those are excellent points for further thought. So for you, the learner, what should the next steps be?
Well, the most valuable thing now is probably to dive deeper into the resources we touched on. Check out the official PHP documentation, php.net. Actually, try the code examples we discussed.
Get your hands dirty.
Exactly. Seriously, consider setting up that local XAMPP environment so you can put these concepts into practice. Your journey into the dynamic world of web apps with PHP has really just begun, and there's a ton more to explore.